What's going on, YouTube? Thanks for joining the channel today. Today we're going to talk about the fatal flaws of the Indian Scout Bobber. There aren't many, so for context, I got this Indian Scout Bobber just a few months ago and have put a few thousand miles on the bike. I love it. Full stop. I love this bike. There's not a whole lot that that turns me off about this bike, but I think it's worth noting that there are some inherent limitations on the Indian Scout Bobber, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. And with some of these flaws, they're not written in stone, meaning you can make some adjustments, you can make modifications to make it a little bit better, but that is what we're going to talk about. So the first one that I wanted to bring up is just the horrible suspension, rear suspension on the Indian Scout Bobber. It's pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie. It's 2 inches of travel. It makes it for a pretty uncomfortable ride. I think I made a video not too long ago about, you know, the first modification on the Indian Scout Bobber being the seat. That is a critical modification if you want to ride your Indian Scout Bobber for a long time. The suspension, it's just not great. I can feel every, like that, I can feel every little bump. I can feel a lot of these, you know, potholes and things of that nature. And after like 30 minutes, an hour or so, my back just starts to hurt. For what it's worth, I knew that going in, so I wasn't too surprised. And I think most of you will know that going in if you did do a little bit of research. But it's worth noting because the suspension is just pretty terrible. I got a different seat, which helped a little bit. But definitely the next mod that I'm looking at is the rear suspension, possibly the piggyback shocks from Indian or Progressive 444s. I heard those two are pretty good. But I do wish that the Indian Scout Bobber came with better suspension. Now there's a pro and con to it because the bike is so low to the ground. You know, it handles really well, low center of gravity, it's easy to manage. You know, it's got a low seat height and all that stuff. But the drawback to it is that the suspension has very little travel, so it's an unforgiving ride. You're gonna feel all the little bumps. What I've been doing is just kind of practicing, you know, using my feet as added suspension, using my legs as added suspension. So when I see a big pothole, raise myself up with my legs. That helps a little bit. So I would say that, oh Jesus, I just felt that right there. And although I did mod my seat, I went back to a solo seat, so there is no give there. It is just a hard seat against the frame. So now it's even more dramatized. Now it's even more pronounced that I can feel every little bump on the road, and it's not pleasant. So that is probably the first fatal flaw of the Indian Scout Bobber, with the caveat that, you know, you can mod it out. Even though the suspension is terrible, the bike is just a lot of fun. I gotta admit, the bike is a lot of fun. Alright, the other fatal flaw is that this bike is not that very big. As you can see, it's a small bike, it's a bobber. So if you're getting this bike with the intention of riding 2-up, it's not gonna be very pleasant. I mean, is it doable? For sure, it's doable. You can do 2-up riding on most bikes. It's just not going to be very comfortable. Let's just say it's not ideal. Thank you. I've seen a lot of people, you know, trade in the Scout Bobber, and I think that is one of the reasons why people tend to trade up towards a different bike, a bigger bike. It's not really meant for 2-up riding, and if you're trying to take a passenger with you, it's not all that comfortable. So that is another fatal flaw on the Scout Bobber. That, you know, I've seen people try to adjust it with, you know, a 2-up seat, a step-up seat. I don't know. I've never done 2-up riding on the Scout Bobber, nor do I have any desire to do so. So that is the second fatal flaw. Third one, kind of related to that, this bike being small, I don't think it's all that great for a bigger rider. You know, this is actually perfect for me. I'm about 5'8", and I can put my feet on the ground, so it's great for that. But anybody that's like 6 foot and above, I think they're gonna have a hard time on the Scout Bobber. Although it does come with forwards on the bike, and it does allow you to stretch out a little bit, I would still say this is not an ideal bike for a taller rider. But for me, this is perfect. I'm definitely comfortable on this bike, and I'm really glad that the Scout Bobber is low to the ground. But anybody who's taller, I don't know. These are not meant for you. Again, like with all things, is it doable? Yes. Is it ideal? No. But I've seen a lot of taller riders, you know, tend to trade up to a Chief, or even bigger, like a Chieftain or a Challenger for those reasons. This is a small bike, very low to the ground. It's a bobber. It's not going to be very comfortable for bigger riders. So for me, that is fatal flaw number 3. The last one that I'm going to leave you with here, it's a short video for today. But man, this tank, this last fatal flaw, I don't think there's anything that you can do about it. The tank is pretty small. It's about 3.3 gallons, 3.4 gallons or so. And it gives you about 100 miles of range, which is plenty for around town riding, but anything longer than that, you're gonna have to do multiple fuel stops. So the tank is really small. It's not great for long distance. Because of that, again, like with all these things, is it possible? Yes, it is certainly possible, but is it ideal? No. And I don't think there is an aftermarket tank that you can get to make it bigger, to get more range. So that's another fatal flaw. But with all of those things being said, you know, this is a fantastic, fantastic bike. I love it for what it is. Great for ripping around town like I am right now. Great for city riding. Very nimble and agile. For me, coming in at 5'8", is perfect, even though the suspension is not great. I'm going to modify that. So after I modify the suspension, I think this will be really dialed in for me. It's a fun bike. So I just want to put this video out there just so you all know what you're getting into. Hopefully you're doing a little bit of research and gathering up all the information that you can about the Scout Bobber. With all of those things being said, I still highly, highly recommend the Scout Bobber. It is just such a fun bike. I'm having a blast on it. You know, I'll probably at some point want to try to do a long distance trip on it, see how it goes, see how it fares. I already know, based on my previous experience with the Sportster, what some of the experience is going to be like. You know, lots of trips to the gas stop, which in and of itself can be a blessing because, you know, once it hits about 100 miles, I'm ready to stand up and stretch my legs. I just thought of another fatal flaw. With the Scout Bobber being so low to the ground, there's not a whole ton of ground clearance. So you are going to be scraping pegs non-stop. Even on like mild curves, you're gonna be scraping pegs. I definitely scrape pegs quite often on this bike. I can kind of live with it. I don't mind scraping the pegs. I definitely enjoy getting that feedback, but just something to be aware of, you know? Alright guys, well that's really gonna do it for me today. I'll see you all later. Peace!